The strong showing from South Africa, quite a weak one from Israel, and we'll have to see what the court makes of that advocacy. The public hearings have just concluded between South Africa and Israel for another round of provisional measures. It ended quite dramatically with someone, I think, from the public gallery shouting liars at the end of Israel's presentation. The feed was quite quickly cut and then quite quickly came back after I think they were removed from the court. I don't think that's ever happened before at the history of the court, which just shows how much public interest there is in this case in particular. Going on now to the arguments presented by both sides. South Africa's team, as always, great advocacy, very powerfully put their case across. We had advocate Adila Hassim get quite emotional when talking about the women and children who had been killed. The key point of South Africa's request is that they're asking for a ceasefire, they're asking for Israel to withdraw from Gaza, and for journalists and independent experts to be allowed into Gaza to record evidence and engage in fact-finding missions. They ended on a request to the court that for our shared humanity, order Israel to leave Gaza and to cease fire. Israel today, meanwhile, I have to say, engaged in quite poor advocacy. It kept on accusing South Africa of appearing before the court again in favor of their military ally, Hamas. It said aid crossings were open, more were opening, field hospitals were up and running, the only issue being that Hamas was using them as military command centers, and they also argued that aid was getting in. The kind of political rhetoric that we're seeing about them accusing South Africa for having ties with Hamas don't really work. I think neither with public opinion really, but definitely not with the court. Israel did claim it didn't have enough time to prepare and that it wanted the hearings to be next week, which wasn't granted, and that the court instead had granted South Africa's date. The court, of course, would have done that also because of the urgency of the nature of the request, but perhaps that does account for the poor legal arguments and, frankly, poor advocacy on display here. It really wasn't a great show from Israel. We will see what the court has to say about this. I do feel perhaps that this time, finally, we may get a ceasefire order. Many judges do seem to be tilting that way, and as well as more concern from the court about the lack of aid getting in, a reaffirmation of the obligations on Israel to ensure that that aid gets in. As far as the independent journalists and experts and fact-finding missions go, I'm not really sure how the court will handle that request. It could go either way, so we'll have to wait and see on that one. But we do conclude these hearings with a strong showing from South Africa, quite a weak one from Israel, and we'll have to see what the court makes of that advocacy.